Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight-Sided Freaks, and this is about as good as it gets for Eight-Sided Freaks. We've got a pay-per-view to talk about, and I'll tell you what, there's just something about having a pay-per-view to talk about. The energy's a little bit higher. You're a little bit more excited. We've got not only a pay-per-view, but this is a great pay-per-view. All 5 fights on the main card are great fights. Some great prelims as well. So we have a lot to talk about today, and UFC 299 preview will be the sole focus of today's show. Jerry, Anthony, and myself in the building going through the fights. Are you guys excited for this weekend? And just from like an overall perspective, how do you view this card? Jerry, we'll kick it off with you first.
I'm very excited. We had a fight night card this past weekend, but we're not talking about that. We didn't really preview it. There's a good reason behind that. 299 is here. O'Malley Vera, the anticipated rematch. I'm excited for that. This card is just stacked. So we'll get into all the details here in a little bit. But from the early prelims, there's stuff to watch for. The actual prelims, 3 ranked fights. It's just a great card. I can't wait for Saturday to get here already.
Yeah, I agree with all the definitely since the main card just seems like a good little fun card, good fights throughout. But this is one of the cards too. Yeah, with the prelims being so good, you can make like a little day out of it. Kind of always have all the fights on in the background too, if anything, and you can a good chance it'll be entertaining. And then I would say, like I kind of just said before we started, had been closing on Saturday, so I'm excited to not have to work or close at least on Saturday and get to do a normal UFC pay-per-view night with maybe invite some of the friends over. So,
Yep, that's about as excited as you can get for a pay-per-view right there. Uninterrupted fights. The main event, great main event, and I think this main event kind of speaks to how deep the bantamweight division is. That we've got Sean O'Malley and Chito Vera, and I think Chito is the 5th or 6th ranked bantamweight, and like this is still a great fight. It's like they went down a decent amount to the rankings to get to this fight, and it's a great fight, and it's a rematch. First fight obviously ended with Chito landing a leg kick. Sean's leg kind of shuts off. Chito goes out, gets the finish. Some controversy there. Sean likes to claim it as not a loss. Some people like to make the excuses. However you view that fight, today or Saturday, we are getting answers, and these two are running it back. What are you guys looking forward to for Sean's first title defense and this matchup? Anthony, we can throw it over to you
first. I guess, I don't know. It's a new era in the sense, right? They've been building O'Malley. He's supposed to be one of the next faces of the UFC. So let's see. I don't know. Let's see what a first title defense, a headline pay-per-view by him does now. Because if he is supposed to be, one of the most popular stars or one of the biggest faces, let's see if it has the same aura of like a John Jones or a McGregor level, pay-per-view card. That would be my first thing, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's my big question is he's talked about all the pay-per-view numbers and all that stuff and wanting to be that next massive UFC face star, whether it's even the face of the UFC. Little concerning because I don't know if you guys saw it. Ilia Topuria, less than a few weeks after his title, now that he's won that, he's the same amount of followers on Instagram as Sean O'Malley, if not more by now. So that just questions how big of a star O'Malley actually is. We'll find out when it is his name as the headliner. Sure, he was on the main event against Aljamain Sterling, but he wasn't the champion. Now he is in Miami. Really was trying to go to this card, but $500 for the last row. I'd rather just stay at home on that one.
Yeah, and I think they kind of knew what they were doing here. For Sean O'Malley in Miami, stat card. I believe this week is college spring break for a lot of colleges, and that's kind of the target demographic that they're trying to hit with O'Malley. They want that younger generation. They want the social media generation, and that's what they're trying to hit here with O'Malley. And hey, if that means they're going to build the stack fight card and put it in Miami, fine by me. I've got no complaints. Should be energetic. And one thing that I find interesting about this fight is And before we even get into like the skills and the X's and O's, in my opinion, I kind of look at Chito Vera like a guy that we've seen get the upset in this spot. Like nothing to do with skills, but like comparing this fight and this matchup and this personality, like Chito reminds me of like a Nate Diaz in a way who got the upset over Conor. He reminds me of a Michael Bisping, a guy who's been in the UFC for a really long time in a way, who got the upset title win. We saw Sean Strickland do it a couple months ago. So, he kind of reminds me in ways of each of these guys. Not identical to any of them, obviously, but he kind of reminds me of these guys. And it's like, man, if Sean Strickland can upset Israel Adesanya, Chito Vera can certainly upset Sean O'Malley. And I've just got this little gut feeling that this may go haywire for the UFC and kind of blow up in their face with Chito. What do you guys kind of make of Chito as a challenger in this spot? Jerry, go ahead.
I mean, he's about as dangerous a guy as you can face. He has 8 knockouts, 10 submissions in his MMA career. He's just been running through people. And we saw, obviously, the front kick against Frankie Edgar that kind of marked the end or the beginning of the end for Frankie, who's now a UFC Hall of Famer. That shows that while he's done that, Marlon or Chito Vera has just been cruising up to the top. Did lose against Corey Sandhagen in that split decision. I think Corey Sandhagen is one of the best guys in this division, so that's not a bad loss by any means. Only other guy he's lost to recently was, I guess, Jose Aldo. You can't knock him for losing to Jose Aldo. No, was one of the best ever. So I think Chito has the potential to beat O'Malley. I'm curious. You did say like this feels like the Nate Diaz kind of thing. To me, Nate Diaz did get the first upset. That might have already come for Chito when then McGregor came back and got the decision the second time. So this is the second one. That's what makes this fight so interesting is it was, 4 years ago almost that the two fought the first time. A lot has changed since then. They've both gotten much better. O'Malley's confidence has risen through the roof, and I think that's what makes him extremely dangerous and something Chito needs to be aware of is he can put people's lights out. No one's ever finished Chito Vera. O'Malley might be the first to do so.
Yeah, this was when I was on the trip and I had missed that podcast, but I think you guys were just for real quick previewing this card, and you had said that Nate Diaz line, and I thought that was really perfect. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I thought that was a perfect way to sum it up. As someone though that wasn't quite tapped into all the lead up before that first Nate Diaz fight, but I could definitely see some similarities. But I think, like you said, Jerry, definitely extremely dangerous. And that's that's the scary part for O'Malley. But I would say I've always been someone that's been more out on Chito, I would say, than most. And it's just because I can't stand how slow he starts his fights. But he fights 3 rounds. When he's doing these in 3-round fights is the big, it's going to be extremely hard to win a fight if you're going to lose your first round in every single one. But I can see with getting the whole 5 rounds and stuff, like you said, a great chin. It's a pretty good gas tank too, so he's going to be dangerous for all 5 rounds. And then kind of like you said, discussing he has great highlight knockouts, but I think the 2 best people he's fought, he's lost to. And I'd count that in is a younger Jose, as in, I don't know how long ago that fight was, and then Corey Sandhagen. And I didn't know if that was a split decision because I don't remember thinking that was a split decision when I was watching it. So, but like you said, he got 1 win. There's no reason he can't do it again. I believe he can beat anyone in the division. I just don't have confidence that it's going to happen, more than 3 times out of 10. Like he obviously can pick his certain strikes and gets these highlight knockouts. But if the 2 people that I thought were the best 2 people he's lost to, I also would think Sean's better than him. So I'm leaning definitely more Sean.
Yeah. And going back to his 2 losses, the Aldo loss was really interesting because Aldo wrestled a lot in that fight. and Cheeto does not do good when you put him on his back. Great submission skills, but you can put him on his back for a long period of time and probably won't be a factor in this fight. And then in the Sandhagen fight, it's like the clearest 50-45 of all time. Sandhagen, I shouldn't say all time, but abundantly clear 50-45. And then one of the judges scored it for Cheeto. And I believe after the fight, Sandhagen said something along the lines of like, yeah, I think I know who that is, and I think he doesn't like me. Apparently, Corey had like a run-in with him one time. That judge was reffing one of Corey's teammates' fights, and Corey got into an argument with him. And he thinks that's kind of where that scorecard came from, but
that's insane.
Interesting that that's even something he has to deal with, considering how clear it was that he won that fight. So
it's like Scott Foster and Chris Paul right there.
Yeah, exactly. But as far as Cheeto goes, like, I agree with a lot of the things you said, Anthony, about Cheeto. Like, Cheeto, he will start very, very slow. And that's kind of helped him in some fights, because in some fights he's good at reading things and getting looks. Like the Dominic Cruz fight, he lost a lot of minutes leading up to that knockout. But like, that's not every fight. You're not going to be able to do that in every single fight. And he doesn't throw a ton. And it's super frustrating because Cheeto has a ton of skills that are like awesome when he uses them. Like, he's got a great jab, and like, he pretty much only threw his jab and his straight against Pedro Munoz and busted him up pretty good. And it's like, just go out there and throw your jab, throw your straight, and start adding on to it once you start landing those. But it's not really what he does, and it's kind of frustrating. And he's got these great kicks, like insane kicks, one of the best kickers in the sport. We didn't really see him that much. Like, he landed the front kick knockout, and he landed the head kick knockout, and he knocked down Rob Font with a hook kick. You never see guys land hook kicks in the UFC. So he's got this really interesting skill set backed with cardio that can take him 25 minutes and a chin that makes sure that he stays in the octagon for all 25. So at a minimum, Cheeto is going to make this interesting. My only concern is that he falls behind early and never catches up like he did in the Sandhagen fight.
Yeah, that's something definitely that's in the back of my mind as well. Now, especially now that you guys have been talking on it, is Sean O'Malley also likes to go out there and finish people quickly and try and put the pressure on and get them done early. If Cheeto comes out slow, it could be a short night for him. But at the same time, we haven't seen O'Malley go 5 rounds. If it does go 5 rounds, how will he hold up compared to Cheeto and we know he can, and we know he has the gas tank to keep going. Something else just to think about in terms of that aspect. That's what makes this fight very, very intriguing and interesting, is there's so many little aspects of it, of so many different ways this fight can go.
I think I was going to say, besides the starting slow, I guess that was my main issue, is how low output he is. And it feels like he never does enough. But then again, he like wipes the slate clean, because then he just gets some late round insane knockout. And then you can't complain that much that he didn't do enough when he still found the shot for the knockout. But like you said about getting behind too, if that's his game plan, because he obviously is great at reading things, right? Because he keeps picking up on things, and he can gets these knockdowns and KOs. But to try to do it to O'Malley, I feel like is the wrong person to try to wait to find the exact perfect shot and keep reading him when he feints so heavily and moves so his own unique way of fighting. But yeah, I think definitely one of the last things I will say on this is one where I should, because it was so long ago, and I've never actually really rewatched the fight since, but I would like to watch that first one again just to see, even though kind of like you said, Jerry, and I agree earlier, that they have changed. They've gotten so much better, both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you said, like, it's a lot harder to get that comeback knockout against Sean. And like, when you're looking at the guys that he did knock out, like Frankie Edgar has flaws that can be exposed. He dips his head very, very drastically when he comes into the pocket. That's why Ortega knocked him out with an uppercut. That's why Corey Sandhagen knocked him out with a flying knee. And that's why Cheeto landed a front kick. I believe Gutierrez got a knee as well. So it's kind of his style. Dominic Cruz is a guy who goes out there with a lot of unique movement, and he caught him in the middle of one of his unique movements. He practically ran into the knockout, and it's a great read. Both are great reads, but my point is those reads are easier to find against a Cruz, against a Edgar, in comparison to an O'Malley. He will have the extra 2 rounds, which he also had in the Cruz fight. I believe the Edgar fight was only 3. So that's a positive, but like it is very tough to be overly confident that he finds that shot. What I will say is that if he can, so going like deep into skills, like Sean can do every single thing that Corey Sandhagen did to win that fight. Like Corey used feints, he used his length, he used his speed, he used his feint, or I already said feints, used like stance switches, danced all around the octagon to a bunch of different attacks. Sean can go out there and do every single thing that Corey did. He can just copy and paste Corey's game plan practically. And we saw that Cheeto didn't really have an answer, and that's a big concern for me for Cheeto. And if he wants to really change this fight form, he's going to have to land leg kicks, and he lands really good leg kicks, doesn't throw them often enough. Which is a theme here. And he didn't throw the leg kicks against Sandhagen, which you'd think against Sandhagen, you'd like to kick his legs and decrease that movement a little bit. He didn't do that, so it's hard to expect him to do it this time around. So there are just a lot of concerns on the Cheeto side for me.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he is going to go back to using leg kicks just because that's what kind of helped him big time in that first fight between the two of them. It's one of those things, but it's what you're saying about the comparisons to Sandhagen. O'Malley's also what makes him dangerous. And I'll use the Petr Yan fight, for example. He kind of got an early lead and then just held off Yan, kept him at range. O'Malley's 3 inches taller. I want to say he has a little bit longer of a reach. He is a very, very tall bantamweight that he can use, and he knows how to use his body and use his length. So that's something else I'll keep in the back of my mind for this is if he does get up early, if he wins the first 2 rounds, he can kind of just ease it and keep him away. Similar to, I'll say, like what Israel Adesanya used to do, where he would just do smart tactical fighting and kind of get the strikes, keep it at distance, don't take any damage because can't get knocked out if you don't get hit.
Yeah, and another thing is that the one difference between Sean and Corey is that Sean has great counters. So, like, even if Cheeto really gets in his face, then, you know, Sean is great at landing those slide back counters. So, I think it's a really tough fight for Cheeto unless he can find a way to make this stationary and kind of stop Sean's movement. Not going to be very easy, though. So, I do have to really side with Sean in this matchup as much as, like I said earlier, the vibes are the vibes of kind of an upset brewing here. But like, I just don't really see it from a skills perspective. So it's hard to be overly confident in it. So any closing thoughts on the main event for either of you before we move over to the co-main, which is also a great fight and also 5 rounds?
I mean, there's so much I think we could still talk about, but this fight's just going to be fun. So unpredictable. I'm honestly surprised O'Malley's as big a betting favorite as he is.
What's the line?
UFC website says it's -218 for O'Malley, +180 for Cheeto.
Yeah, and that's moved quite a bit.
Yeah.
Which way?
Minus
towards Sean. So
Yeah,
Sean
yeah.
is -270, -250, depending on the book.
Yeah.
Cheeto +220, +230 in some spots. So
Yeah.
That's too bad.
here's a PSA to a lot of people who maybe don't know a ton about MMA betting, but be really wary with some of these favorites. Sometimes favorites are very, very justified, but lately, and especially in the last couple weeks, there's been a lot of favorites, and there's probably been a lot of parlay money on favorites, and we've seen lines move heavily towards favorites. Last week, Basharat was like a -1,000 favorite, and Ayman Zahabi beat him as like a +600 dog. And I think Basharat started in like the -250 range, and just so much parlay money comes in and it moves him. Other fights as well. Umar closed at like minus 1,600 last week. So be careful with some of these big favorites because maybe they should be a minus 200 favorite or a minus 250 favorite. But all this parlay money comes in, and all of a sudden they're minus 500 for really inexplicable reasons, and there just aren't enough people that want to plug their nose and take the dog shot. So be wary if you're making parlays out there. Just a public service announcement.
I was a victim of that minus 900 fight this weekend. I went 9 for 10 on my bet. That was the only one I lost because I was like minus 900. I didn't look too much into the fight. I was just like, okay, easy enough. We'll throw it in there.
You do always do good with like 9 out of 10s because you make the bigger ones where you just pick the kind of the UFC card. But I was gonna say also maybe PSA, maybe don't touch a minus 900. You can probably leave that at home.
Yeah, I think the books had a good time watching UFC last week, seeing one of the big favorites crash out and bust what I assume to be a lot of parlays. So,
and that's one of the other things for this week's card is so many of these are such toss-ups. Like it'll be a plus 110 to minus 140 sort of thing, or even there's a couple that are both minus or all around. So it's going to be an interesting one if you're betting this week.
Mm-hmm.
To lead into it, I'm actually curious what's the line look for this fight?
Yeah. Benoit Saint-Denis, Dustin Poirier. This line has also got some movement towards the Saint-Denis side. He opened as a favorite and moved as a bigger favorite. So Saint-Denis is currently minus 198. Some spots he's a little bit lower.
I got minus 235.
Minus, where's that at?
DraftKings is him at minus 235, which is surprising.
Oh yeah, probably should have refreshed my little. That's why. So that there's the line movement for you. I refreshed my tab and the line's 25 points worse. So money coming in on Saint-Denis. But yes, very very good fight here, and that puts Poirier at like the plus 180 range, moving towards Saint-Denis in this spot. This great fight, 5 rounds. Jerry, you want to kick us off here? What do you make of this matchup?
I think it's a very interesting one, but it's a very telling fight. It gives us a guy in Saint-Denis, and this can be said for a lot of these upcoming fights that we'll be talking about on this card. It's a seasoned veteran versus the new generation, and how are they going to fare with it? This one will start. Dustin Poirier is 35 years old. He's already said this is going to be his 30th fight in the UFC. We've talked many times before. That is a lot of fights, first of all. But once you get to 35, it seems like something just changes. We saw it with Volkanovski. We've seen it with other champions. Sure, Poirier isn't a champion at the moment, but he's still 35. And Benoit Saint-Denis, I really, really enjoy watching him. I don't know if it's because he was a special officer or special forces officer in the French military. I think that whole story is kind of cool. But he also just finishes people. Lost his first UFC fight by decision, and since then it's been a pair of submissions and then 3 knockout TKOs. He finds ways to get people out of there. He's never won by decision, always been a finish. He is just a very, very fun guy to watch, and I'm curious to see where he stacks up against the number 3 ranked guy in Dustin Poirier, because this is his first real big test. This is the biggest fight of his career. He's ranked 12th right now. This could put him into the title picture potentially if he comes out and takes care of business against Dustin Poirier.
Definitely, I agree. I think definitely, obviously, the biggest fight of his career. I was trying to look Matt Frivola and Thiago Moises. Like those names, I think those are good names to have too. Obviously, way bigger step up here compared to those. But overall, this is one I don't know. I feel like Saint-Denis is very very hot, like super hyped in a good way, because I do think he is deserving of it. But this is the one, almost like the exact opposite of, or I'm going to do the exact opposite of Poirier Volk, when I said I always stick with the old guy for a little too long and the veteran, and I never take it. But I chose Poirier. But now this one, I kind of want to go back to my old ways and take Poirier again. Even though, if I was just looking at his record too, I mean, you have the McGregor wins, do with that. How important you think those are. Lost to Oliveira, can't really fault him for that. And then his last fight, or the last win, was Michael Chandler. Once again, I don't know. It's a tough record because if your wins are against Michael Chandler and McGregor, and I don't know if those aren't the best wins in the division, based on Chandler likes to perform a lot for the crowd and had those super fun fights, and McGregor's McGregor, and then yet he loses to Oliveira and Gaethje, who are arguably probably the best fighters in that division. So besides Champ, obviously too, but so it's tough. I don't know. I just don't know where I'm at on Saint-Denis yet. If I think he's capable of that upper echelon of top 3 fighters, then based off Poirier's last couple, he's probably going to lose to him. But if I think he's not there yet and he's kind of floating around that McGregor Chandler area, then Poirier should be able to pull off the win as an underdog.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I think is really interesting about Poirier's record as of late is just how often he's been fighting. He fought once in 2023, once in 2022, and 3 times in 2021. So very active in 2021 and 2020 and pretty much everything before that. But 2022 and 2023, 2 fights in 2 years. And that's not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing because he's going through less actual physical damage, because he is a guy who takes damage in his fights more often than not. Obviously some clean wins in there, but more often than not, he's absorbing some level of damage just because of the way he fights. And now that you're 35, and it's kind of one of these spots where the regression could really sneak up on you just because of who he's fought as of late and how often you've seen him in the octagon. So all of a sudden, maybe there's some serious regression in the last 6 months, and it kind of sneaks up on you because we haven't seen him in the octagon 4 times in the last 2 years, or 6 times in the last 2 years, or however many times. So the regression could really sneak up in this spot. And if it does, Benoit Saint-Denis, as Jerry said earlier, if you lose to Benoit Saint-Denis, you don't lose gracefully. You're probably not losing a close decision. When Benoit Saint-Denis beats people, he hurts people.
Just look at the Frivola knockout.
Yeah. And contrasting the Frivola knockout and the Moises, I believe that was a ground and pound. One is one shot, put you down. His kicks are insane. And the Moises fight is just repetitively landing big shots, and just the pressure of all these big shots kind of accumulating. 2 very different ways to get someone out of the octagon. He can do both, whether it's accumulation of damage or damage in one shot. And that's something that is more rare than I think some people realize, to be able to go out there and get people out in either of those fashions. So he's a very dangerous guy. And I think this is going to be an absolute war. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think this is going to be clean, a very clean fight. Benoit Saint-Denis is a maniac, fights like a maniac, and he's probably bringing that type of war to Dustin Poirier.
Yeah.
Real quick, I'd say, so if you think it's going to be a war, you don't think Poirier is over the cliff yet, though, and the regression is there, or you think he still has a war in him?
I'm picking Saint-Denis. Because I know for 100% he has the capability to get into a war. Mm-hmm. He's not coming off a knockout loss either. But that doesn't mean Dustin Poirier can't compete in a war. But I think Benoit Saint-Denis, I 100% know can compete in a war, and he has the grappling upside, in my opinion. I think he's more likely to get in a war on the feet, shoot takedowns, get 2 minutes of top control time, where he's just repeatedly throwing ground and pound. He's ridiculous from top because he's either chasing a submission or throwing ground and pound until you stand up. You stand up, he takes you down again. Now you're in the same cycle of getting your face pounded in, and it's just it's a very hard style to beat when he can fight at his pace. So I'm taking Saint-Denis to answer that. question.
Did you say this was a 5-round fight?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 5 rounds.
Okay. That
Poirier was the one who asked for the extra 2, I believe.
All right, that makes it interesting. That's not a surprise that Poirier is the one to ask for it because we haven't seen Denis obviously ever go. We've seen him go to 1 decision. That's the only fight he's ever lost. So there's all that aspect. And even in that fight, he was dominated because the guy he was fighting had a point deducted. So it was one of those, his UFC debut. That's all behind him. I'm curious to see how he does do against Dustin Poirier. And same thing with Alexander. I'm bringing in that comparison of Poirier and Volkanovski again. Volkanovski's last fight before the Poirier one, he got head kicked to oblivion by Islam Makhachev. Last time Dustin Poirier fought, he got head kicked by Justin Gaethje for what? I think that was the knockout of the year, I want to say, or one of the
I'm honestly not. I don't know what actually won the award, but regardless, he was out cold.
He was out cold. Will we see that? Do you think we'll see kind of his chin is gone a little bit? Same way we saw Volkanovski and his chin looked gone. Obviously, Volkanovski fights far more frequently, so he's taking a bit more damage as of late. But Poirier going into his 39th career fight, 30th in the UFC, I don't know how long his chin's going to hold up. And a guy like Saint-Denis could very well take advantage of that and put him out early.
No, you go.
I was just going to say that I think in comparing Volkanovski and Poirier, I think Poirier has career-wise had a lot more damage on his chin, but I think Volkanovski has had historically his chin has not been as good as Poirier's, and he's had more time off. So I think it could go, but I think it's harder to predict than Volkanovski's going.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one that being so early in the week, I'll have to look into more.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm not super tapped in to Saint-Denis yet. I think, like I kind of said earlier, but I've watched him win 3 or 4 fights now by getting his hand raised by finish. So I mean, I know the danger's there. It's just it's tough because if you said he chases finishes or submissions, I'm sorry, he chases submissions when he is grappling in that arena. I mean, a couple of fights ago, Poirier did just get submitted, but now would you compare Saint-Denis grappling? He got submitted by Vera, which who doesn't? Mm-hmm. And then you say he has great kicks, and then kind of like Jerry just said, just got knocked out, just got finished by the kick. But if anything, I'm hoping for a war. I'm hoping I would check. So if it's 5 rounds, what's the longest Saint-Denis has made it to?
He's made one decision.
Yeah, he had 1 decision that went all 3 rounds. That
3
was
rounds.
Short. I think that was like a week's notice, up a weight class against Alessio Dos Santos, and Dos Santos knocked out Sean Strickland. So that's a dangerous dude. He may not be ranked, but his striking, if you go out and strike with him, he is dangerous. So it's not a great look, but it's also not a terrible loss on short notice up a weight class.
Yeah. So, I'm excited. This is when I'm also going to be excited to watch the little previews and stuff. I think, I don't think Saint-Denis has ever fought a fighter that's as defensively good as Poirier. And I'm hoping that step up in maybe not always being able to just tap someone and touch them the whole fight. Although if it turns into a war, that can go to him. But at least with his, the high guard he has and a little bit of the shoulder rolled, and then, being in there with he's seen multiple fighters throughout his career like Denis. Just let's see if he still has the age, and he hasn't regressed like you said, because that is one of the things I am worried about.
Mm-hmm. And here's the last thing I have to add on this fight is that Benoit Saint-Denis is a guy that I really doubted a couple fights ago. I picked Moises to beat him, and my reasoning was this guy Benoit Saint-Denis fights like a maniac and gets countered all over the octagon. I mean, he gets countered every single fight. And that was my concern. And then he goes out there, fights Moises, and gets countered repeatedly. I mean, I rewatched that, and in the last 10 seconds of the first round, Moises lands 2 right hands that are as hard as he could possibly hit Benoit Saint-Denis. Both times Benoit Saint-Denis looked at him and threw back. And obviously the first time that happened, he got hit again, and he kept going. And it's like, this guy has superhuman durability. So like he gets countered like no other, but it's actually shocking how big of a punch he can eat and keep pushing. And he's still only 28. So that is one of the things that I want to add because that was my big hang up on Saint-Denis. And then I find out that he's got one of the best chins I've ever seen. So I do want to add that before we close this preview. So that's also one of the reasons I'm picking Saint-Denis is because even if Poirier smacks him in the first round with 4 massive right hands, it's like, or left hands regardless, it's like, well, I've seen him eat ridiculous shots before, so adds a little bit of confidence for Saint-Denis in a brawl.
Oh yeah, it has to. If you know you can take shots like that and keep going, that's a big confidence booster. I'm with you, James. I'm taking Saint-Denis as well. I just think he's got it on his side right now. I think he's a little more dangerous. Poirier, obviously, at 35 isn't a great look, but I can see him getting submitted here. Sure, Poirier did submit Michael Chandler, but that was a really weird submission, if I can remember it. It was like a weird fight that ended down there. Doesn't have a good track record otherwise, and Saint-Denis is a very talented Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist.
Yep. Moving on to the next fight, we've got the UFC debut of Michael Venom Page taking on Kevin Holland. To start, I believe, Jerry, we'll swing it over to you first this time. I think it's your turn to lead us off. Michael Venom Page versus Kevin Holland. What's your how hyped are you to see Michael Venom Page in the UFC octagon? He was in Bellator for a very, very long time. Now he's making his UFC debut. Are you excited to see Michael Venom Page in the octagon? And what do you make of his first matchup being Kevin Holland?
So I'm not gonna lie, I don't know a ton about Michael Venom Page. I've seen highlights of him, especially in this week when looking at previews and all that stuff in preparation mostly for this show. But I didn't know much about him. Anytime there's an Englishman, though, they're fighting, I'm a little biased and always want to see them do well and think it's going to be fun. But I'm curious, and I think Kevin Holland's the perfect type of guy to throw at him for his first UFC fight. I want to say Michael Page is relatively old now. Isn't he, what, 35, 36?
36, yeah.
Definitely a guy that seemed like he should have come to the UFC a little while ago. He only has 2 losses, and that's something else to possibly consider of where he stands up. But this is a perfect fight. Kevin Holland's a guy that'll fight anyone, anywhere, as we've seen, and he'll bring it to you on the feet, potentially on the ground, and just one of those things because, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael Venom Page is very much a stand-up guy. He's got some nasty kicks, some nasty shots that he throws. So if this is a stand-up fight, I think it'll be an absolute banger and very excited for it. Love seeing new blood in the UFC, and it also shows that say Michael Venom Page comes out and finishes Kevin Holland quickly. That puts the welterweight division on notice. That's someone else you just throw in there, even at his age, that can potentially make a run towards the belt. And give me an all-English fight at a soccer stadium in England. That would be a hell of a thing with Leon Edwards.
Yeah, that would put me on notice if he starts Kevin Holland. Because I agree. Or same thing as in, I've watched a lot of the highlights. I think I watched 2 fights of him when he was in Bellator, not the most recent ones, but watched 2 of MVP. And he's fun. I do think I'm worried about the age. He's a little bit older, but I think the UFC is really just whenever I guess I was going to say this is another fight I'm excited for. I'm a huge Kevin Holland fan. I think he has really entertaining fights. But then again, I was going to say, I guess it's kind of hard to mismatch him. They only did that when they would just put straight wrestlers in front of him when he was jumping up and down weight classes. Where I think he filled in last second too, I guess, besides that Chimaev one. Oh, yeah. But I think this should be a perfect stand-up fight. Another one, a little bit like the Wonder Boy fight, where I think you know what you should get, and we should see some high-level striking. Obviously, Wonder Boy has a different style than Michael Venom Page, but yeah, I'm excited for it, and I lean the younger guy that I think probably hits harder and is quicker. And can land a lot of the same strikes. So I am leaning with I think he probably has better hands too. And I'm leaning Holland so far. But I'm definitely excited for this. I think it should be a fun little break before the championship fights in the 3v whatever Saint-Denis ranked, or if he is.
Yeah, he's like 12, I think.
Okay.
But Michael Venom Page, for people who haven't watched him, I think he is his UFC comparison would be Wonder Boy. They don't fight exactly the same. Their stances are a little different. They have some different skills. Wonder Boy's a little older, so like they aren't exact carbon copies of each other, but that unique stance that is heavily sideways, heavily karate based, heavy kicks. He's pretty explosive. Do have some concerns with the age, because if that explosivity goes in the slightest bit, he's going to have a lot of troubles. His fighting style has just always been really reliant on being explosive. Years ago, he knocked out, I believe his last name is Cyborg, with a flying knee and dented the guy's forehead. So, like, he's got like an explosive, style, and he can brutally hurt you. But if that explosiveness goes in the slightest bit, he's gonna run into a lot of problems. And he's another guy who has not fought a ton recently. He even did a bare knuckle fight with Mike Perry, and Mike Perry did him pretty bad in that spot. And I think that is a indication of where his hands are at. I think his kicks are outstanding, but I do think he lacks a little bit in the hands. And in this matchup, he's getting a guy, one of the few guys in the welterweight division that kind of has a similar size profile to him in terms of height and reach. So this is actually it's a good matchup for MVP, because you can be confident that Kevin Holland's going to strike with him. Kevin Holland could probably out-wrestle him and submit him on the ground. Kevin Holland's very slick. Well, maybe he doesn't submit him, but Kevin Holland's a better grappler. I'll just say that. But he's not going to use it. So it's a good matchup in that regard, but it is a bad matchup in terms of this is the only guy that you're not significantly taller than, significantly longer than. And that'll probably create more boxing. And if I think Kevin Holland has better hands, I'm going to pick Kevin Holland in a fight that is going to have more boxing in comparison to some of MVP's more previous fights. And kind of a trend on this card, he is the younger fighter as well. So that is another benefit as well. So I'm going Kevin Holland. Wish we would have saw MVP come to the UFC a little sooner. Maybe age 33, age 32. We may be a tad late here, but that doesn't mean he can't ring off, from age 36 to age 37, 38, have a decent little run a little bit in his late career, similar to what Chandler did. I think Chandler was a tad bit younger when he came over, but he still did some good work at a little bit of an older age. So not counting him out, but I do think Kevin Holland wins this fight.
Yeah, I just have one other thing to kind of say on this, and especially on the Michael Venom Page side of things, is you say he doesn't fight very often. He hasn't fought in almost a year. And that one lasted 26 seconds with a leg kick TKO. So having 26 seconds of fighting since May of 2022, outside of that bare knuckle fight that went 6 rounds, because it was a draw with Mike Perry. Also, Mike Perry's the best bare knuckle boxer out there. It seems like every time I see him, he runs through someone. So that's kind of not surprising he lost that, but I'm curious to see how much he's changed. I'm going to go back and watch much more film on him before I make my prediction. I am still leaning Kevin Holland at this moment, but it's one of those ones that I want to see more of Michael Venom Page, even if it is old stuff. Mm-hmm. This lines up. I will say this lines up. If he does come out and beat Kevin Holland, Wonder Boy, Michael Venom Page, easiest fight to make.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's a must make if he wins.
I think that Chandler, it's a very easy comparison, but I think it's a good one too, because I think this is just the perfect fight for I almost said Wonder Boy, for Venom Page to look good in. Like, it could be a fun showing. They didn't give him I think, kind of like I was saying earlier, Holland is a perfect option for someone to have a fun fight where you don't have to worry about. You got to worry about some tricky striking, right? Definitely some good striking. So it will be, there is the risk of getting knocked out or finished in some form that way. But if you are a striker, that's exactly the fight you want. So you don't got to worry about getting just held and out grappled the whole time. Mm-hmm. So this is it's a good fight for both of them. For either of them to raise their stock, or for both of them to raise their stock in just a good back and forth fight.
Yeah, if this is like a really entertaining back and forth fight, then it's probably a win-win. Obviously, the winner will win more,
Mhm.
but I think this is a scenario where the loser you go, I'd like to see him fight, again and give him another good fight. So, I do think that is
Which is the Chandler go-to right now, is lose, but be like, I'd watch him fight again.
yeah, that is Chandler special.
Entertaining fighter that gets beat every time.
All right, moving down on the card. This one, kind of a stylistical clash. Gilbert Burns, Jack Della Maddalena. This is closely aligned. Didn't shout this out in the last fight. Last fight was Kevin Holland minus 125, Michael Venom Page minus 105. So nearly a pick 'em. This fight, Gilbert Burns, Jack Della Maddalena. Gilbert Burns plus 130, Jack Della minus 160. So close line here. Two very different fighters. This is another fight where we've got the older guy, Gilbert Burns. It's not like he's 40, but I believe he's 35 or 36. And then you've got Jack Della Maddalena, who is still on the young side of 30, still in his 20s. So very, very different age here, leaning towards Jack Della Maddalena, but styles make fights, and this is a very interesting stylistical clash. Anthony, what do you make of this matchup and this step up in competition for Jack Della Maddalena?
I like it. I think he's proven that he's worthy of fighting this, like around this level of competition. This is another one where it's not that I'm not the biggest fan of Jack Della. I just know there are a lot more bigger fans than me of him. Obviously, super entertaining fighter, has a lot of finishes on his record as well. But I am a big fan of Gilbert Burns, and it's Gilbert Burns can wrestle a little better than Basil Hafez in that one fight. That he has a good chance, because Jack looked like he was kind of drowning in that fight and got lost a little bit. But obviously you got to worry about the hands. I just believe in Gilbert's chin and his hands too, because in that my fight, was that one of Gilbert's last one? Didn't he break his hand, right, and stopped throwing? Or no, I'm sorry, that was against Bilal.
Bilal, shoulder got absolutely,
or his shoulder
destroyed, I believe.
And he stopped. He didn't throw for 2 rounds, and with one side of his body
4.
he couldn't throw. 4. Okay, yeah.
He didn't throw it all for 2 rounds, and then the last 2 rounds he was like, "Well, I can still use my other arm, I guess." That was the fight where it was the 4th round had just ended, and he was like, "What round is it? The 2nd?" And they were like, "No, Gilbert, no, it's the 5th." It was something wild like that. So that fight was not a great look for Gilbert, but he did get hurt.
And that's also just a quick thing. That's why Bilal wasn't offered a title shot. If you can't finish a one-arm Gilbert Burns,
oh god, yeah,
what's he doing?
Bilal can't even finish his dinner. But I think, yeah. So that's why I think Burns is. I'm excited for him, and I think this has the potential to be a fun little striking, because I think Gilbert's always down to throw. Della definitely believes in his striking, and he's of course always down to throw. That's how he gets a lot of his wins. So I'm excited, and then with that, besides the striking, obviously I think Burns has the advantage on the ground, and with some submissions, I think he has the advantage. So I think it could be fun. I think he has some different options to get his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was really big on Jack Della Maddalena in the last couple of years. I really enjoyed watching him fight, but it was, as much as I still enjoy watching him fight, the Kevin Holland fight and then the Basil Hafez fights showed some major holes. There's a reason they both ended as split decisions after he was on a dominant 4-fight finish streak. And those are holes that you can't have against a guy like Gilbert Burns. Sure, Gilbert's 10 years older than him now. I think they're 37 and 27. So that's a big age gap. And maybe that it is coming towards the end of Gilbert Burns' time in the octagon. But I still see him with the much, much better ground game. And if he can get him down, it's not like he needs to submit it. I don't think Jack Della Maddalena has great ground control. He will get held there and kind of just swamped if Gilbert Burns gets him down there. If it's on the feet, though, I give a big advantage at the moment to Jack. He's the quicker guy. He's probably the more powerful guy at the moment. don't know if you saw the video this past week. It looked a little buffered a bit, but there was some video of him punching one of these hanging bags and then he sent it flying off. Not gonna lie, it looked a little fake at some points, but still, if it was real, that just shows the absolute absurd power that he has. Say it was fake because it buffered, and then next thing you know, the bag's flying across the screen.
Wait,
so it's one of the
which one? Who did that?
Jack Della.
Della Maddalena.
Okay.
Wii Sports style knocked the bag right off the chains.
Oh yeah, Wii Sports is great until you fight Matt.
Get you every time.
Exactly. But I don't know. This is going to be an interesting fight. I can see it going both ways. It's just like that, like you're saying, that typical grappler versus stand-up fighter fight. And if it stays on the feet, I give the advantage to Jack. If it goes on the ground, advantage Gilbert. I will say, if it does go to the ground, I want to see some improvement from Jack Della Maddalena. I want to see him try and get back up, see him successfully maybe do some counter moves and end up going from his back, getting Gilbert over. So just curious to see that aspect, but that's kind of my take on this one. I'm still probably Jack in the end, but
yeah,
maybe don't chase horrible submissions too.
Yeah,
that was the first thing I was gonna say is I'm watching Jack fight Basil Hafez. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. Like, what are you doing, dude?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's Jack, outstanding boxing. I love his hands. He hits like abnormally hard. I don't know if it's like flash knockout power, but when he hits, it's kind of like a thudding power. Like, it looks like it hurts. And he lands like 4-punch combos, mixes to the head and body. Absolutely love Jack Della Maddalena's boxing. So why are you jumping guillotines? He jumped like 4 gillies against Basil Hafez. And then once he didn't land the gilly, which he never had a chance to land in the first place, he'd lay on his back, or he wouldn't lay on his back. He wouldn't be able to get up for several minutes. And you do it once and you're like, all right, you tried the gilly, didn't come close, don't jump again. And then you watch him do it at least 3 more times and you're getting ready to pull your hair out. Like, what are you doing, dude? And he was jumping gilly because he was hurting him with his hands and then jumping gilly, like trying to finish him off. It's like, no, keep throwing the hands. You're hurting him with the hands. It was the most infuriating fight I've ever watched from like a game plan, fight IQ. Maybe not the most infuriating. I often talk in hyperbole, but that fight was insane to watch.
I was stunned watching it.
He finishes him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So, but with the Gilbert Burns, it's like I really like Gilbert. Think he's really, really underrated, but he's 37, coming off completely destroying his shoulder. And that is a major, major concern. I still think he wins this fight because Jack has been put in really bad positions on the ground several times in his career. And Gilbert Burns is like an ADCC champ, like one of the most accomplished jiu-jitsu practitioners for what he's done outside of the octagon. So it's like, and he's not like a guy who needs to pull guard and chase submissions. It's like, no, he'll land a takedown, control from top, and try and land subs from top. And if he doesn't land the sub, he's still winning rounds and winning minutes. So it's like, and on the feet, Jack probably has him cleared 90% of the time, but Gilbert Burns has one of the best overhand right counters out there. And there's a chance he just lands the most insane overhand you've ever seen, and he flattens Jack Della Maddalena. I mean, the one he landed on Khamzat Chimaev is like insane. When he lands the clean overhand, Chimaev's head practically does a 360 on his neck. He dropped Usman in like the first exchange of that fight with his overhand right. Jack Della Maddalena, much cleaner striker and boxer, but that doesn't mean he doesn't land the shot coming over the top if if Jack gets a little overconfident. So I think Gilbert wins because of what he can do on the ground, contrasting with some of the flaws that we've seen with Jack on the ground. But it's a 37-year-old coming off an elbow, surgery. I assume he had surgery. His elbow was destroyed, or shoulder, excuse me. His shoulder was destroyed, and he's 37, and he's been in wars, so there's a bunch of concern there. And then for Della Maddalena, still 27, he's still at the point in his career where he can make improvements. So it's not out of the question that he has significantly improved. I think we're going to learn a lot in this fight, one way or another. But I kind of have to lean with the grappler at this point.
Yeah, my one thing was, I guess, like you talked about, you never really know what the regression looks like until they step in the octagon again. Because I was going to say, I know Burns is old, but this is one of the cases where I still don't really see it too much in the octagon, at least for me. Now, maybe it was showing last fight, but the excuse of his shoulder being just blown out is like masking it a little bit. But to me, I still think he's looked fine, looked capable of beating, high level people. And even though the boxing and striking for Maddalena and the quickness worry me, I would, yeah, like you said, I'd trust I think I trust his chin still, his durability a little bit, hopefully so far. And then to at least maybe hang in there on the feet until he can maybe find it on the ground to get the win.
Yeah, I'd be much more concerned if this were like a different stylistical matchup. Like if this was, say, Jeff Neal, and we know Jeff Neal has great takedown defense, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But if Jack's grappling doesn't hold up, then the matchup gets a lot different, even if he is slightly, regressed. So last fight on the main card, we have an absolutely outstanding fight. Song Yadong versus Petr Yan. We have Petr Yan at -115, Song Yadong -105. So another very, very close money line here. And am I wrong to say that Petr Yan might be the best fighter that's like I think he's 1-4 in his last 5?
Yeah,
he might be he might be the most talented fighter to ever be on that poor of a run.
Yeah.
No, I mean Tony Ferguson, but
well, I mean, like,
yeah, I mean, like, still actually good. Well, yeah, that happens, unfortunately. But
like current skills that he lost the fights with, not like historically. But
I agree. I think so.
There's a reason he's lost 3 straight and 4 of his last 5, and is still the number 4 ranked bantamweight in the world. He's still that monster. And I mean, you look at the fights he lost. It was what? Split decision with Aljo, or I mean, I guess the DQ against Aljo. Then he manhandled Corey Sandhagen. And then I was out here saying Corey Sandhagen's probably one of the best bantamweights around now. So that win's great. The split decision in the rematch against Aljo kind of made sense on that. I thought he won the O'Malley fight personally, but that was another split decision. Then Merab going absolute mental and attempting 49, 50 takedowns or something absurd like that. There's not much you can do about that. Song Yadong, though, I think is going to stand with him, and that's where Petr Yan can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think the quick overview, because I'm a big Song Yadong guy, obviously Team Alpha Male and stuff, so I was rooting for him. But just like you said, he's 1-5. He's too good, too talented to where it's like he's due for a win. And unfortunately, I feel like Team Alpha Male guys always seem to lose the most important fight or the next fight. So I can just it seems like it's in the cards for Petr Yan to get back in the win column and just be a little bit too much for Yadong. So I'll leave it at there for now.
Yeah. And there's a world where Petr Yan doesn't throw the illegal knee, and he wins that fight 2 minutes later by stoppage and just goes on and starts defending the belt. Like, that's a very real world. There's a world where that Sean O'Malley fight is a 5-round title fight, and he lost that Sean O'Malley fight.
Okay.
But if technically, I'm not even talking about how I scored it. You can make a case he won that fight.
Yeah.
But if there's 2 more rounds, like, I favor Yan in rounds 4 and 5.
It was looking pretty good then.
Yeah. And there's another world where he wins the split decision against Aljo and he wins the decision against O'Malley. It's like those were 2 close fights that if you give those to Yan, I would not have one issue with it at all. So it's been an unfortunate run, but man, these are 2 really talented guys. These are 2 guys where you put them up against each other, and I'm like, I really don't want to pick one of them to lose. Like, I like both of these guys a lot. 2 really, really good guys. And when you look at like Song Yadong, his fight with Corey Sandhagen was competitive. And like, yeah, he lost that fight. He got stopped because of the cut. But if you're in a competitive fight with Corey Sandhagen, hats off to you. His fight with Corey Sandhagen was more competitive than Cheetos. And styles make fights, but I mean, it was not only more competitive, but like 100 times more competitive, like miles more. So Song Yadong is a very, very good boxer, but man, you're telling me someone's going to strike with Petr Yan? I have a hard time not picking Petr Yan. Like, I know he's 1-4 in his last 5, but I've got a lot of respect for what Yan can do on the feet. So I have a hard time picking against Yan, but he is a guy that is a little bit of a slow starter. So he's going to have to go with that. That is a big concern that I have in this fight. Maybe he goes out there and really picks up the pace earlier, but that is a concern in this matchup. I would have much rather had this been a 5-round fight. But I'm not going to complain at all about getting it to open a pay-per-view card. It's going to be a great, great fight. I just don't like picking strikers against Yan. It's just not something I really do.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, had it been a 5-round fight, there'd be a whole load of other aspects because Song Yadong actually has gone 5 rounds. So that brings in another element of, I don't know if, because we know Yan is kind of a slower starter at times. I don't know if Song Yadong is as well. But that would have made it interesting because he finished Ricky Simon with a knockout in the 5th round. Chris Gutierrez was a 5-round decision. Corey Sandhagen even got knocked out at the very end, or got stopped at the end of the 4th round in that fight. So this would have been a great, and I think we may have just touched on this before the show started. This would have been a great fight night main event. Would have been a great time to see, but I'm here for it. I'm here for it. 3 rounds. Opening up the pay-per-view. It's going to be a fun fight, and I'm a little concerned for Song Yadong just because I feel like this is one that Petr Yan has to win.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think that has to win too is a great point. I think at least I'd say you kind of touched on it. Slow starter. So since it is a 3-round fight, get it around. If you can get the first one because of Yan being a slow starter, I think I trust Song Yadong enough to maybe win a round off of striking, even though we were just talking about how great of a striker Yan is. If the case is it works out to where Yan just drops the first one just because he drops it, I can see a path where Song Yadong maybe just beats him for 1 round, and there you go right there. That's 2-1. I know Yan has a bunch of amazing trips. It's tough to say you can just out wrestle Yan. Obviously, like no one's Marab level takedowns and stuff like that. And but I think Yadong also has pretty solid wrestling himself. So maybe he's gonna have to like almost out veteran Yan, and he's the younger guy because that's the best way I see him winning a decision is strategically. Picking his shots, obviously taking advantage of if he slow starts, try to get a takedown in the fight or maybe cage control, everything strategically and around to try to sneak out 2 rounds, because I would say, at least I wouldn't expect the path to be a win by knockout against Yan for this fight.
Yeah, and if anyone who can land takedowns against Yan is going to have a much easier time, not only because you're getting control time on the scorecards, but because Yan is a guy who starts slow because he likes to make reads. So if you're landing a takedown and getting 2 minutes of top control, you're really cutting down on the amount of reads he can make in a round. And that just from like a strategic standpoint of how Yan is going to approach the fight, you can really mess with things and how he reads fighters and makes adjustments later in the fight. So if you can get it to the ground, it's a much easier matchup. But he does have great takedown defense. The problem with Aljo is if you get taken down once by Aljo, he backpacks you and there goes a round. And Marab can shoot 50 takedowns. So 2 guys with highly unique grappling styles that really found ways to implement their grappling in their own unique ways. So I don't know if tough matchup is the right word, but those 2 guys fought very well against Yan. And this is an important fight here for Yan because I don't know what happens if he loses this fight. I don't want to say he should be cut because we all know how talented he is. Like there's no reason to cut him, but Maybe he has to fight an unranked guy, which that even sounds weird. But I mean, I still think Petr Yan is legit, so I got to go with Petr here.
I have an idea for if he loses, and I could see the UFC doing this. They'll probably I could see them throwing him to Umar Nurmagomedov, who didn't look great this weekend apparently. So there's that, but I could see that being something that the UFC would do.
Yeah, it's interesting because
it would be a name that Umar would have beaten, a big name, and they can just warrant him moving up the rankings.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I don't know if they'd want to. You want to get Umar the win, but you don't really want to kill off Petr Yan. So it's like a weird dichotomy there. It kind of depends on what they'd want to do with Yan, whether they want him to work his way back up or whether they want him to lose too, so they can cut him and say he's not very good when another organization signs him. Is kind of a however they want to approach that situation. But all right. We're an hour and 5 minutes in, and we touched on the 5 main card fights. We did not get to any of the prelims, but there are some great prelims on this card. We've got 3 ranked fights, like Jerry said at the start of the show. So there's a lot left. So final thoughts on the card. What are you guys looking at on the prelims? Whether it's one thing, 2 things, we can kind of make this a little bit of a final thought section if we want to, but I don't want to just close down the show and we've got this much meat left on a card. So what are you guys looking forward to from a final thoughts perspective? I believe, Jerry, it's your turn to lead this one off.
I mean, obviously the last 3 fights of the prelims card are all top ranked guys and girls fighting against each other. But the guy I'm really curious to see how he does is a 35-year-old Cuban, Robelis de España. He's making his UFC debut, former Olympic bronze medalist in Taekwondo. He's 6'8", 260 for heavyweight. His last 3 fights have lasted, I want to say, 19 seconds total, 3 knockouts. So I want to see how he looks coming into the UFC because he's a very agile-looking heavyweight from what I've seen. And, I mean, that's something we are kind of getting more of. Like you look at Tom Aspinall, he's a quick moving, athletic heavyweight. The John Jones, not as much anymore, kind of because he's just on the bigger side. Stipe's old. Bring in a new guy. This guy is 36, 37, so he's not a young guy, but hey, let's see what he can do at this point. Otherwise, I like the big heavyweight fight between Curtis Blades and Jailton Almeida. I think that'll be a fun one.
I agree. I'll pick up Petr too because I'm excited for the Curtis Blades fight. I like Curtis Blades. I think he's a fun, skilled fighter for the heavyweight division. Especially, I guess you just don't see that much wrestling too among heavyweights, most of them, and even more so with Almeida. I just don't know how good he is. I think he just has, once again, a specific skill that heavyweights are just not good fighters and they don't know how to do. So I think, but this is a fun matchup to show at least Almeida is the real deal in a sense, because I think if he beats Blades, I think Blades is probably capable enough to not get taken down or superly easily submitted like a lot of Almeida's other opponents. So I think I'm just interested to see. It's a good litmus test to see about Almeida because I would probably assume Curtis Blades gets the job done. And then the last one I'll say, Macy Barber. I remember when she was on her run when she first started of trying to become the youngest, champion before she blew her knee out against Roxanne Modafferi and kind of got just pieced up that whole fight. But I'm excited. Team Alpha Male. She's fighting Chukagian, who I don't know. It says Chukagian. That's not her last name anymore, right?
Yeah. It's not her last name anymore, but I could not even begin to guess how to pronounce her new name, her married last name. The broadcast will need to help me on that one. I haven't even heard that one no one's heard that one on tape yet, so no one really knows how to say it.
But yeah, I'm just excited for that fight, rooting for Barber, so that one should be those main 2 actually. I'm just excited for get there a little early, make the night start a little early before the main card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of similar thoughts, so I'll keep it brief on those ones. Almeida versus Blades. We're gonna find out how good Jailton Almeida is. It's as simple as that. Litmus test was a great way to phrase it. And I'm interested because Tom Aspinall is very, very good. And I don't know who beats him, but we'll see how Almeida looks against Curtis Blades. It's going to be very telling. I also love the Chukagian and Barber fight. It's a hilarious fight because I've seen people call Macy Barber Bar Brawling Barber, and very fitting. She's one of the, she's a very scrappy fighter. Get in your face, get in the clinch, throw big shots from the clinch, make it a brawl. Caitlin Chukagian is very much, I'm going to stay on the outside, throw a bunch of strikes, hit you with a third of them, and it's going to be one of the most boring fights you've ever watched in your life. Crazy dynamic when you put the two against each other. I want to see what happens here, whose style wins out. And then the last ranked fight, Mateusz Gamrot versus RDA. RDA back at 155 pounds. He's a little bit older. Gamrot is really impressed at 155 pounds. Done some really good work on the ground. I'm interested to see if he's able to grapple up RDA. In this weight class, RDA coming off a loss where he got grappled a lot against Vicente Luque, but Luque is a pretty big 170 pounder. Now he's going up against a 155er. So I'm interested to see how RDA looks back at the lightweight limit. He's kind of been doing the bounce between 55 and 70, which I absolutely hate, but RDA is a guy who is really a tweener between the two weight classes, and I'm interested to see how Gamrot looks against a legend. So I think that's just a really interesting matchup, even if Gamrot's a big favorite. So those are the three ranked fights. So I didn't really dive too deep down the card, but those are three really, really important fights for being prelim fights. All three ranked matchups, and all three fights have fighters who could fight for a title in the next year, 2 years, depending on how their divisions play out. So very important fights there.
Oh yeah, this is such a good card. Everything about it, it's arguably the best card we've had in the UFC for a very long time. They're saying 298 was a great card, 299 is amazing, as we've been talking about it, and 300 just as good. So we got some good stuff coming up, thankfully, because the Apex fight nights are not looking overly pretty.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we're going to preview UFC 300. That's we might have to make a
special.
We might have to find a time to pan out more than an hour. We're already at an hour 12, but UFC 300 is stacked, and we've been blessed with a couple good pay-per-views here in a row. So that gives us some good stuff to talk about. And next week we'll be recapping the card. So these fights, we've talked about how important these fights are. Well, next week we'll be breaking down how the fighters looked and kind of the future for them and their divisions and who they should be booked against, those sorts of things. So next week is a fun episode. The pay-per-view previews and recaps are always the funnest episodes to record, and I assume they're the best to watch as well. So, and last thing I'll plug, UFC preview. I'll do a kind of an in-depth write-up of skills, and all three of us and Garrett will have our predictions in. So it's kind of our final stamp on the card and who we think will win. So make sure you look out for that on Friday. Now that all the self plugs are out of the way, thank you for tuning in to Vendetta Sports Media and 8-Sided Freaks. We'll catch you next week.